All right, good morning, everyone. I have 11 a.m. Eastern on my watch, so I'll start this webinar for the CANMaPP system. Given that most of you or all of you registered for this webinar, I'll assume you're somewhat familiar with the acronym since you probably read it through this flyer. But CANMaPP stands for the Computer Assisted Nutrient Management Planning Program. And it's a tool that we built at the Institute of Water Research. I probably should introduce myself first. I'm Glenn O'Neill, environmental scientist and GIS specialist at IWR. I'm the primary developer of the system. And the system was developed with support from a grant through the Conservation Innovation Grant Program through Michigan NRCS, with also inputs and assistance from Michigan State University Extension, MDARD, MEAP, Michigan Farm Bureau, and Michigan Agribusiness Association. And so in this webinar, I'm going to do a walkthrough of the system, go over some of its key functions, highlight some things that you can do with the tool, while also providing some background on the system itself. I scheduled it for an hour. It'll probably be done before 12. So if you have any questions, there is a Q&A option, I believe. If I haven't done a webinar before, and I'm the only person from IWR on this call, so I'm going to be trying to conduct the webinar while also fielding questions. So if you can find the place where you can submit a question, go ahead and do so, and if it worked at the end of the webinar, I'll try and address some of those. Otherwise, if you have questions and I don't answer them here, I'm unable to answer them. My contact information is down here. I'll highlight it several times throughout the webinar, and you're more than welcome to send me an email or give me a phone call. My phone number, I'll show that later as well, at any time afterwards, and I'll be happy to address any questions that you might have for the system. All right, so let me hop out of here. And we'll go into the system itself. And let me just check to see if there are any messages. If you cannot hear me for any reason, or I should say if someone can hear me, perhaps they can just submit a message to in the chat window of your Zoom webinar chat if you know how to access that. If you can hear me, just so I know my audio is coming through, if someone just send a message saying we can hear you, then I should be able to see that on the Zoom chat. Okay, so that's been confirmed. Great, so we'll continue. Thank you. All right, so CANMaPP, as I mentioned, stands for Computer Assisted Nutrient Management Planning Program. The genesis for this project came from NRCS. They were looking for some type of tool that could assist with nutrient management, specifically helping with the documentation of nutrient management to make it easier for both producers or crop advisors or people who are working with producers to more easily document what they're doing in the nutrient management plans, so that it can be easier for NRCS to verify it and get payments issued for nutrient management planning programs that they're administering. And so that's the primary goal of this tool right now, is to help with the documentation. There are long-term plans for the tool to further assist the nutrient management plan process with NRCS. Our hopes are to grow the tool someday to kind of facilitate the online verification and communication with NRCS, and to kind of be a one-stop shop for creating nutrient management plans, all the way down to verifying them and administering payments. But the primary goal of the system as it is right now, and what I'll demonstrate today, is to help producers manage and document their nutrient management plans. And that's what I'll walk through today. So in order to use the system, you have to have an account. and it's pretty simple to register for account. And I'll mention now that the only piece of information that we gather is an email address. So you don't even need to provide a first name, last name, phone number. So it's a fairly anonymous system. You just provide your email address and you can use all the system's features. And so I have some demos that I'm going to walk through today. I have a dummy account that I'd set up ahead of time, so I will start working through that. Let me just log in here. All right, let's get that. And so when you log in, if you have an account, it'll start with a dashboard giving you an overview of the fields that you've associated with your account, the plans in your account, how much fertilizer and manure it's managing, upcoming events in your calendar, recent activity on the system, and all these will be a little clearer as I walk through the system, but this is kind of your starting place on the system. So what we're going to do first is we're going to import a plan into the system. So the way that I'm going to do that by clicking create a new plan. And the way that works on the system is that you import a spreadsheet from an NRCS 590 spreadsheet from a previously approved nutrient management plan. I mentioned earlier that we think long-term, one of our goals is to, I'm sorry, hold on one second, is to have this be a place where you can start the nutrient management plan development process. But in this initial version, and through our initial discussions with the NRCS, we decided to make users, require them to have an approved plan that they could then import into the system for online documentation. And in surveying some producers and people who develop nutrient management plans to see what the most common format or digital format that someone might have for an approved nutrient management plan, and it was the NRCS 590 spreadsheet. So in order to import a plan and start using the system, you have to have one of those. Now you might have one as part of an already approved nutrient management plan, or if you don't, and you still want to use the system, you can still access the system's benefits by downloading a copy, which you can access here and filling it out yourself. I have an open copy here that we downloaded from NRCS, and it has the basic components of a nutrient management plan from the crops that are grown, the soil tests, nutrient sources, applications and application rates, and how that breaks down in terms of the overall NP&K budget. So I'll come back to this in a moment. But if you have one of these, or even if you don't have one of these, you can kind of fill out a dummy one and import it into the system to get you started. So we're going to continue assuming that we have a completed one. And in the first question, it's going to ask you for a name for a project to store this plan in. I'm going to call it December demo project. And I also have existing projects in my account that I could store it in as well. We'll create a new one and we'll call it demo plan 1. And it's going to apply to the year 2017. That's what the plan would be for. And it'll ask who approved the plan. And I'm just going to say Sparty approved it. And it's going to ask for a date. And just for the sake of simplicity, there are a number of places in the system where it's going to ask you to specify a date for some aspect of your plan. But just to move things along, I'm just going to pick the quick dates from the calendar. So they're all going to be from this month. All right, and then the next step, it's going to ask you to upload that NRCS 590 spreadsheet file, and you'll click Browse to locate it on your computer. And so I have that one that I just showed before, which is from the year 2017. And I'll open it and it loaded it up there. And I'll click continue. And so I won't read all this text here, but essentially what the system is going to do, it's going to read this spreadsheet. It's going to try and pull out all the data, all the relevant data from this spreadsheet. And it's going to ask the user to review it to make sure that it read it correctly. The first thing you have to do is specify the workbook name. And if you're familiar with Excel, you know that you can have different workbooks, different sheets that you can tab between here. And so the system first wants to know, well, which one of these should I read? And you might have a number of them, you might have only one. They might have different pieces of information in them, but it's going to ask which workbook, which is what these tabs are referred to in Excel. And we're going to pick this example field fertilizer. And we can see that now it's read through the contents of that. It's pulled out the overview information, the field conditions and recommendations. It pulled out that and the soil test information from the spreadsheet. And for the nutrient sources, it pulled off all that other information. And so we don't need to go in here and make a bunch of changes. It's mainly just for us to review it and make sure that the system read it correctly. So I would go back to the spreadsheet and make sure that the data that's in there is accurately represented here. And if need be, if it didn't read it, I could make those changes here. But once I've confirmed that, then I can click Create Plan, and it'll move me on to the next part of the process, which is to identify the fields that are going to be associated with this plan that I just imported. Now, I have some fields that I've already drawn in my account, and so they're displayed here, and I could just check those to add them to a plan. Or I could draw a new field, which is what I'll do right now. So there's a search menu up here for a location. I'll just say Michigan State University. That'll zoom in there. And I'll just pick from some of the research fields in the southern part of the campus. And I'll just pick some random fields here. I think these are turf grass research fields. To start drawing, there's a draw button up here. And you just click here. And you click your points. And you can double click or click this, the letter C to end it. If for some reason your plan has more than one field, you can draw multiple fields to include in the same plan. Or if it's just for one particular field, that's fine as well. You can change the name here. We'll call this Demo Field 1. And we'll say Continue. And it'll ask us if we have any setbacks that we want to add to the plan. I'll say yes. And similar kind of menu, we see the field here. I have setbacks that I'd previously saved in my account that I could add, or I could draw a new one. And just to keep the map simple, I'm just going to draw a shape down here. And the system allows you to draw more than just simple rectangles. You can draw all different kinds of shapes with the system if need be. But just to keep it simple, we'll keep that setback down there, and we'll call this south setback. And we'll save. And so we've created the plan. We've taken that spreadsheet, imported the data, associated it with some fields that we'd identified and drew the boundaries of. And now it wants to know what we want to do with it. We can just go to our dashboard and interact with other parts of the tool, or we could add some more details to our plan. Because ultimately, we're capturing more that CANMapp's capturing more than just what was in that spreadsheet. So we're going to do that now. I'm going to add plan details. And it gives me kind of a dashboard view of the plan. We have the project it's stored in, when it was approved, the years that are in a plan. We could add multiple years to a plan so that we can track it over time. I'll get into that a little later. When it was recreated in the system, and we have a number of other things we can do, including importing a new year into this plan, looking at nutrient budgets, building detailed reports of plan consistency or field reports. I'll get into those a bit more later. And we can get into some of the details of the individual fields. Now, I also can jump back and forth between different plans that I have in my account to view those, but we'll stick with this demo one that we're using right now. So I'm going to provide some more info about what is going into demo field 1 for this plan. And so I'll do that simply by clicking on the field name here, and it's going to open up this view, which allows me to provide some more details about the plan. Now, we did meet with a number of stakeholders earlier on when we were trying to sketch out what the system could be or what types of information would be useful for producers to have access to or to track through the system. And one piece of advice that we gotten from multiple stakeholders was the use of MSU Extension's record-keeping system for crop production. That if there was a digital version of this book, this paper format of record keeping, that would be something useful to producers. And so this layout that we have here and the pieces of information that we're gathering was based upon that. I'll open up a link here. Reference. Let's download the file. And so it's a very simple and straightforward record-keeping tool. Let me rotate the view so it's a little easier to see. And so field by field, you just have 2 sheets of paper that capture the crop that was grown, the acreage, the nutrient needs, the planting date, the tillage, fertilizer applications, manure applications, pesticide applications, and CANMaPP is capturing most of this, not all the details of the manure applications, and we're not capturing pesticide applications as of yet. But the same basic info that's in here, we've tried to capture in CANMaPP as well. And so what the users can do with the system is they can see what was pulled out of the 590 spreadsheet, which is the data that you see here, but also other information that wasn't in that spreadsheet that the user can provide. And it's organized into two different types of data. There's the plan data, so what was planned for the operation, and then what we would call the implemented, what actually occurred. So this would be, the user would specify what was in the original plan, and then perhaps at the end of the year, they could come back and specify what was actually implemented, or they could do that throughout the year. And to do that, they would click Edit Plan Data, and that would make these menus editable, where they could specify different options. So I'm going to just kind of quickly move through some of these menu items just to get some values in there for us to work with. So there are a number of different crops in here. We'll keep it simple and say that we planned on growing corn for grain, and that's what we actually did. And we'll say that our yield was what we were anticipating. The nutrients that were actually implemented, those are blank right here because those will be calculated based upon the soil test, the fertilizer application, and the manure application rate. So we'll come back to that. The planting dates, again, just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to keep everything simple here, but you can navigate back to whatever date you need to navigate to. But for now, we're just going to say that all happened recently in December. The same thing here. We'll say planted and harvested on the same day. So that was a very, I'm sorry, those are the application dates, sorry. But planting and harvesting 1 day later. So that was a very quick growing crop. All right, we'll keep the fertilizers the same. There are a number of fertilizers here in the system. You also have the ability to create your own custom fertilizers if you have your own unique blends that you've created. So that is an option that's in the system. For this demo, we're just going to keep the plans the same, although I will make one change. So it was originally planned of applying urea at 50 pounds per acre. We're going to make that 55. We'll keep the DAP application the same. And if you needed to, there's the ability to add an additional fertilizer record, so you can make some additions but it's going to default to what was in the original plan. And then we have a manure application. Again, I'm doing that tomorrow. We'll keep the manure source the same. It does ask you to specify the N, P, and K ratios of the manure. And we'll keep that rate the same. And one difference with manure is that it does ask the user to specify how many acres the manure was applied on, as opposed to regular fertilizer. So we have 3.8 acres on this field. If we tried to apply more than that, then the system would tell us. I'm just going to say 2.5. And we'll click Save Edits when done. And you can see that the system updated the N, P, and K values accordingly. And we'll note that the planned nitrogen component was 53.5 pounds per acre, that the amount that was actually implemented was slightly higher at 55.8, and that's accounted for in the fact that our urea application was slightly higher, and I made that slightly higher just to point out how these calculations are being done here. And also, I'll come back to that point when we talk about reports. Some other editable options in this menu here. One of the other things that stakeholders mentioned was the desire to associate CLUs with these. Now, we don't have access to CLU data, so it's not something that we could grab in the background to incorporate into the system. So we couldn't just take these boundaries and grab the CLUs in there. But if for note-keeping purposes, if a user wanted to just have these as reference points for their particular field, there's a menu where they could just specify as just simple text the CLUs associated with a particular field. You can also add field notes. And they're displayed there as well. All right, so now we've provided some more details for our field here. And now we can start looking at how we can share these results, or how we can get at reports of these results that could help us in our documentation of our nutrient management plan. So over on the left, there's a reports function here, and there are a couple different types of reports that you can build. It asks you to specify what plan you're interested in building a report for and what year. Some of the reports allow you to look at multiple years. But I'd shown before how I had changed the urea application rate. And so one of the options is the plan consistency report. So this will look through the plan to see if there are any differences between what was planned and what was implemented, as a means to try and help avoid any particular issues that could arise when trying to do verification with NRCS for the nutrient management plan. And one of the things that identified, one was that the applied total nitrogen was higher than what was planned, and we can see why below that it identifies that in fertilizer application, the urea rate was greater than the planned amount. And apparently there were also some changes. I didn't have exactly the same application method, not that would necessarily cause a problem, but it'll just identify any areas where there were some discrepancies between what was planned and what was implemented. Other things you can do with the report builders, you specify the year and the plan again, is you can build a detailed report that will produce a PDF with all the relevant information for your field. And you can include multiple fields in these reports. So depending on how many fields you have in a plan, it could get long. And so that'll affect how long it takes to produce them. But I do have some sample reports saved ahead of time, so we don't have to sit here and wait for it. And what that includes is kind of an overview of the plan. So it gives you a nutrient budget for fields in a plan. This is a different plan that I generated ahead of time. But I have 2 fields It gives me the total acreages and the NP and K breakdown in terms of planned and actual nutrient application in each of those and the differences between those. Again, these are just dummy values just to demonstrate how these work. But then in addition to the nutrient budget, it gives you for each field a map with any of the notes and CLUs identified for that field. And then it gives you the field details that we would fill out in that previous menu, including the fertilizer applications, any manure applications. And then it'll break that down also by for the other field. So you might have multiple fields in a particular plan, and it'll produce these same documents for each field. And this would be something that you could do at the end of the year in a simple standardized format that would encapsulate all the pertinent information for your nutrient management plan, and something that you could, a producer or user could save for their own documentation or share with NRCS as they try and move through the verification process to get their payments for nutrient management plans. If I have back in here, it'll tell me that the report is complete. It'll also, once it's complete, it'll email a copy to the address associated with your account. But once it's done, you can click on here. And if you have setbacks, it'll also include information about the setbacks. There's the field that we drew, the details, and it'll include a map of the setback if there was one, if one was associated with it. All right, now there are other reports that you can produce. To demonstrate how some of those work, I'm going to use some of the previously saved plans that I have in my account. So for example, I have this MSU research plan. It has multiple years and multiple fields associated with it. And so I can look at a nutrient budget organized by field in that plan over those 2 years. If I click Build Report, then it'll give me the plan, the Plot A field, and it'll break down my nutrient budget for 2016 and 2017 for that field. And I can click on any of these year links, and that'll open up the details for that field and that year. And I'll hop back in here. I can also, let me cue that one up again. So that was organized by field. I can also organize the nutrient budget by year. And instead of having plot A with its years, I can look at 2016, the 2 fields associated in that plan, and what my overall nutrient budget is for those 2 fields in that year. So a couple different ways that you can look at nutrient budgets in the system. All right, the next thing I wanted to highlight was the calendar. So you can look at a calendar. It'll show you events in your plans. So I kept all those events in December just to keep it simple. So I have a legend over here for the different colors in the calendar. Blue indicates planting. So, you know, it reminds me that on December 2nd, I planted in demo field 1. And I can click on the calendar and it'll show me the crop and the tillage and the plan for it. And it has the harvest date. So you could imagine that if you had multiple plans with multiple fields, that this calendar might be useful in at least showing you what's happening on your operations at different dates. And it goes back in time, so you could you could go back in time and view when certain planting dates were from a calendar view. All right, so next I want to highlight that in going through that process of creating that demo plan 1, it updates the dashboard. So now I don't have the I don't remember what the exact numbers were, but I assume there were only 6 fields in my account covering less than 268.6 acres. But it gives you, these will update over time as you add details to the plans or as you add new fields. Your dashboard will reflect that. It also has upcoming events in your calendar. So it'll show you the next 10 events in your plan. So I have December 31st, again, just a dummy date for demonstrating its functionality. For demo plan 1, I'm applying manure on 2.5 acres. So if there were multiple things going on in the future, that would be reflected here. And the recent activity, it just shows what you've been doing on the system recently. So we created a new plan named Demo Plan 1. We updated the notes for Demo Field 1. So that'll be reflected in there as well. Some other features of the system that I didn't get through in that particular demo, but are worthwhile pointing out are that for fields, if you have a lot of fields that you're working with, there is a menu for importing a shapefile in which you could, there are instructions on how to do that. It's not necessarily a straightforward process, but if you do have a lot of fields that you're working with and you have access to their shapefiles, it might be easier for you to upload them to the system, and then you can start using them or interacting with them in your plan. So that option's available to you now. I won't go through that just yet, but that option is available. Another feature that I wanted to highlight, go to my dashboard, is the ability to interact with your fields and search them amongst a number of different criteria. So I'm going to click on View My Fields here, and I have the fields that I've created in my account. Now, again, these are all just demos, but I can view them here pretty easily. If I needed to delete any of them from my account, I can do that as well, although it'll give you ample warning to make sure you really want to delete a field. But if, for example, you wanted to, and this would probably be more useful if you had a large number of fields that you were working with, but if you wanted, for example, to see the fields in which you have were part of a plan for 2018. I don't know how common a query that would be, but you'd have the ability to filter your fields to see those. So, for example, I could say plan year 2018, click Apply Filter, and it would show me I'd have 2 plans for which I have data stored for plan year 2018. If I wanted to refine this further and see, for example, show me which field of mine I planned on growing corn grain, but instead grew alfalfa. Again, don't know how common a query that would be, but just to demonstrate that type of functionality, I could say planned corn grain, implemented alfalfa, plan year 2018, and apply filter, and that would apply. It would show me the one field that met that criteria. I can clear my selections here. If I instead wanted to see, show me the field in which I've applied ammonium nitrate. So that would be under what I actually implemented, ammonium nitrate, and click Apply Filter. And so it would show me that particular field. I could also look at specific dates. If I wanted to see if there was a field in which that was harvested on Halloween in 2018, I can do that. There we go. And it could show me that. Now, again, I don't know how common a question that would be or a need, but it gives you an indication as the types of querying you could do. And if you had 30 or 50 fields that you were managing, then that type of functionality might be useful. And that was one of the stakeholder inputs that we got, especially from producers, was the desire to be able to see their fields and do these types of queries just to get a sense of, you know, what fields certain things are happening on, or what events are upcoming for certain fields in their plans. All right, and so I think we've covered the main features here. If you want to do a guided walkthrough of the system, on the About page, there's just a brief background on the system, but there is a walkthrough from a recent hands-on workshop that we had that can guide you through how to use the system to complete some of the tasks that I demonstrated here. And you can walk through this at your own pace, but it'll give you the detailed instructions and screen captures on how to do some of this yourself. So that's available to you. And if you have any questions or you get stuck or you run into any problems, this is a brand new system, so bugs do happen. But if you do come across any of those, please don't hesitate to contact me. You can find me on the contact page here under the technical assistance contact. My phone number and my email address. Email's probably preferable, but you can call me as well, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But that's about it. There will be updates to the system going forward. We're working on or hoping to submit another conservation innovation grant to expand the system, specifically to not just require a 590 spreadsheet, but to allow this to be a place where you can start building a nutrient management plan from scratch, and to connect directly with NRCS representatives to kind of facilitate plan documentation, so that someone could utilize the system to walk through creating a plan from scratch, getting it approved, documented, and verified with NRCS. So that's what I had to cover. Again, if you have any questions, you have my contact info. If anyone has any questions, I'm going to, again, apologize for not having done this before, but I'm going to try and see if there are any questions that anyone has asked. I don't see any listed here. But if you do have any questions as you use the system, again, please use my contact information, and I appreciate you joining me today, and I'm looking forward to people utilizing the system. And if you have any thoughts or inputs on improvements that can be made to the system, then please fill those out or send those to me as well. I will be sending you just a quick link to a survey about the system that you could fill out at your leisure, but we'd appreciate any feedback that you could offer on both the webinar and on the system itself. So I guess with that, I'll say thank you again, and I'll end the webinar here. Happy New Year, everybody.